I have already gone through past videos and will continue to go through future videos that underline the brilliance of Fabula Ultima's system on how it simplifies and quickens a lot of things that I feel bogged down traditional TTRPGs. And the topic that we're going to speak about today is no exception. In this episode of How to Fabula Ultima, we're going to go over inventory and inventory points. Now, before we get started, like always, I just want to give a quick shout out to the people that give me their views, give me their likes, and then also subscribe to my channel. And if you haven't already, just click my subscribe button. It doesn't take much and it really helps me grow and let the analytics see that what I'm putting out has value. And I think that Fabula Ultima is going to continue to grow to be a fantastic game. It's already up there in a lot of hearts of people that have played it, but there's so many people that I feel just have never heard about it, or maybe they've played JRPGs and never had TTRPGs in their life. I want to bridge those scenarios. And I think being able to showcase a game that is simple to pick up and understanding the rules pretty quickly is a great way to be brought into the TTRPG world. So, as always, like, subscribe, and let's go check out inventory points. So, as I prefaced in the intro of the video, the game system of Fabula Ultima in their handling of inventory is a pretty brilliant thing. And at least from my look at it at face value with what it's trying to do, because since it is a rules light system and it wants a lot of limited complexities, at least when it comes to the simpler things in the game, I think the inventory system has been well established because if you look at two different spectrums, we look at the JRPG spectrum, where a lot of the old traditional retro games, you go through their item lists of what they used to use on themselves or some allies. There is a lot, and you kind of get overwhelmed by the amount of items that can be in there as you collect through the game. But also, in the reality of it, you can't take that huge yield of items and bring it into a TTRPG like Pathfinder or Dungeons and Dragons without it just being a huge weight condition situation. That is, if you allow weights in the game. But either way, it's going to be problematic. And also, no one wants to write down 800 different items to keep track of, even if you're splitting that responsibility. Well, we're going to go into how Fabula Ultima handles that. So, when it comes to handling your player character's inventory, it's actually a pretty limited and easy to maintain list. Because when it comes to it on your character sheet, the things you really only have to look at is your equipment, which is basically your weapons, your armor, maybe some shields, and accessories your characters will accumulate throughout the game. If you played any JRPGs, especially in the Final Fantasy era, accessories are like a one slot item that you're put in to kind of maybe negate an effect or give some sort of cool boon. They're great add ons in the game. But after that, anything you notate on your character sheet really only holds a narrative value in most cases, and you don't really have to keep track of anything else. And the reason why they're able to achieve that is they use a system called the inventory point system. Now, I know the sound of inventory points sounds maybe a little daunting, like you're going to have to worry about a lot of checks and balances and being your player character's own personal accountant to see what is expended. But it's actually a super simple system. And really, all inventory points are a reservoir of consumable and useful items you might pull in a pinch, whether it's in combat or on the road. And really, when you look at it, you just have to check your character sheet. Every character upon character creation starts with a maximum IP inventory point pool of 6. After that, you can bring in other character classes as you multi-class that will permanently increase that inventory point pool, and you can continue to grow. And some of those are the Wayfarer, the Rogue, and very, very dependable on IP points, the Tinkerer. So now that you have somewhat of a conceptual understanding of inventory points, you're probably asking, well, Josh, what do you do with them? What do we spend them on? Well, that can be easily achieved by looking at this chart that just zoomed in on my side. And quickly you'll notice that it's pretty small and condensed. And that's by purpose, because that's the whole point of the systems to keep things free flowing, simple, and not be bogged down with a huge inventory list. So if you look at the chart, you'll notice that there, along with the limited items, there is an IP cost, which represents how many points you have to spend to activate one of the items. And these items are contributing to survivability for your players in the combat system and also in maybe treacherous travel. Now, it's also worth noting that when you do activate some of these through IP points, they are immediately used. They're not being maintained in a reservation or your inventory list. That is defeating the purpose of this. What it's doing is creating a quick activation to assume basically you have this in your inventory and then it is applied. And that's pretty much it when it comes to spending the IP points. Now, there is one class in particular that has a huge dependency on spending inventory points, and that is the Tinkerer. And we'll go into that in a little bit, and there'll be a little bit of coverage of that, but most of it will be on my covering of the Tinkerer class because it's pretty complex but awesome and one of my favorite classes. And also with the recent edition of the Natural Fantasy Atlas that came out, there's also the Gourmet that also has some applications of inventory points. So now your player characters have been traversing for a while. They've done some dungeon delving, they've fought some monsters, and I'm sure maybe one or two have touched something they shouldn't have touched, and maybe eaten something they shouldn't have eaten, and they have acquired conditions that all have had to be remedied by using inventory points. Well, now the traveling's gone a little long, and they are starting to go low on inventory points. So now they have to start making some pretty critical thoughts on how they're going to maintain. Do they go find a village or town? Do they try to risk it and keep going? That's where I think some of the fun of Fabula Ultima comes into play because as fun and rewarding the game is, sometimes you really have to be tactical. Do you want to keep trying to trudge to get to a certain scenario because you have a clock on it? Or do you try to look for a town and see if there's something nearby? And let's say they find a village or a town, they can then buy inventory points back. It is basically the um, abstract idea of just refilling your inventory. And the way that is achieved by going to these cities and towns is a vendor will sell one inventory point for 10 zenith, which is the overall national currency of Fabula Ultima. If you have a different word for it, you can do that. But basically, for one inventory point, it's 10 of the currency. Now, you can also have it at discount if maybe they've done something awesome for the vendors or the local village, or maybe it'll be worse if they've offended the magistrate of a town. But either way, that is the price point. And basically, they can renew all the way to their maximum for 10 zenith. Now, there's also other ways they can accumulate it. You can maybe just be a very nice GM, and if they're in the middle of a desert, they might end up rolling something. They'll roll a discovery on their travel day, and that's achieved by just rolling a one. That might be where I say, oh, well, you might find this mysterious merchant at an oasis, or maybe there was a survivor's kit that was found off of a long deceased traveler, something that would allow them to get their IP points back. It's really up to you how you want to present it. But as far as actual renewable capabilities by the player's choice, they have to be in a town or village or find some sort of vendor to renew those points. Now that we've gone over the core elements of how the IP points are expended and recharged, there's a few extra things that I feel are very important to inject really quickly. The first and one of the more important is that you can use your IP points to create an item to use on another individual, whether it's an ally or an enemy, should there need to be an application of damage through another element. But you can use those IP points to create an item for someone else. It does not have to be applied to yourself. However, you must be using the inventory action when any time you use IP points in a combat to apply those effects. You are basically giving up your action that you would otherwise use for attacks or maybe guarding someone or casting a spell to make IP points create an item and apply to someone. That's it. There's no other action economy unless there might be some extra skills you obtain in leveling up and becoming higher power, where you might have extra attacks or that are bypassed by action. Whatever the case, the system is pretty good at protecting the um, action economy when it comes to that. Then there is sharing. There is no sharing IP points to make a cumulative build to make an item. So you cannot make a magical tent that requires four by taking one individual's IP point left, another's IP point, and then someone else who's got two to make four. It must be cast by one person who has enough points to achieve it. One of the final and probably the most important thing to go under this list that I was just quickly putting in is the concept of IP points in gear and tools. And when I say that, I originally stated that it's not worth tracking having normal gear, traveling gear, winter gear if you're traveling in some sort of icy terrain, having climbing gear, all that stuff should be sensible to have. But what if you have certain characters that have traits or identities through their traits that kind of define their character? Maybe, for example, a roguish archetype might more sensibly also have lockpicks, kits to disarm traps, things like that that would just have at the ready for them. But there might be another character that's like a noble knight or something like that that is maybe locked with some shackles or something like that that wouldn't normally have those type of items. That is where it's important as a GM to consider allowing IP points to be used to say they would have that. And they can say how or why, or just say it miraculously happens. It even is in the core rulebook where it's kind of magically happens as they use in quotations because that's how IP points work. But it's sensible to give them that opportunity to use IP points if it's not traditional in their character traits, but also not a ridiculous item that wouldn't be sensibly in sight or in possession. Now, that being said, it's worth noting that using those inventory points to get a lockpick for the night. I know earlier I said that you can basically use IP points to have an item that are immediately used, and that's usually the application of combat. Now, in this situation, I would be a little narratively reserved and let the knight pull it out, and maybe he's trying to smuggle it, if not use it. It doesn't just immediately get used, it might be something used to get someone out. I'm okay with that. I think that's in the good spirit of the IP system. What is not cool is to pull it out for a temporary existence and then sell it to a vendor. That is not the spirit of the IP point system. In no way, shape, or form should it be applied that way. So if they ever do try to sell stuff that they're acquiring with inventory points, make sure it's always at the half value of what they would always spend to obtain an inventory point. Then there's also larger, more impactful items. You do not need to be making a inventory list of more potent, powerful things like resistance potions or bombs or anything like that. Those are not for the IP system as far as what is put on the chart. Those are actually acquired through the tinkerer's capability of making inventions through projects, which allows them to either make really awesome long-term items or they can make more intricate one-time uses that can be technically held on in your inventory and then used with IP points to then be used at a different time. So it's worth understanding that the IP system is also a merit system and not for abuse to try to break the game. Now, as always at the end of my video, I'm hoping I've been able to articulate the topic at hand. And with the inventory point system, this is just one of many awesome injections that are rules light and make this game easy to play and run, not only as a GM, but as a group. And for me, it's my favorite contribution to the game system because, as someone who has been running TTRPGs for over 5 years now and have played since I was 8 years old, item accountability and checking inventory has never been a thing I've enjoyed. And I understand there's people that love the checks and balances of more crunchier games, but I'm not one of them. And Fabula Ultima is continually trying to have its complexities focused on the fun and the resourceful imagination of the collaborative narrative and not the crunch and technical aspects of the game. Of course, there's certain understandings that come with it, but at the same time, this game continues to grow and become more and more a in-home game, in my opinion, that I am just encouraging you to try. Get the core rule book, support these awesome creators, and join the community of awesome people that I've had nothing but great experiences in exchanging with. So, that being said, as always, if you've liked my videos, please continue to throw those likes up. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do. It helps me understand that you're liking what you see and encourages me to keep putting out this content. Because when I first started making this just about showing rules, I'm understanding there's a growing community that really wants to put this game forward and people want to learn more. So until then, I hope you enjoy your evening, enjoy your day, and I cannot wait until the next How to Fabula Ultima.